as you kind of noticed, there's a new person here, and things are going to be a little different from here on out. As you know, I'm Ryan.
I'm Devin.
And this is the first episode of Loose Balls. Hi, Ellie. Everybody say hi to Ellie. We wanted to record a little emergency podcast about the massive trade that just happened in the NBA today. And then on Monday, we'll be a little bit more formal, have like an intro and everything going. But it was just such a huge trade, and we wanted to get something started quickly this week. So I'll get right into it. I'll stop burying the lead. The New York Knicks traded Julius Randle, Donte Divencenzo, and a protected Detroit first-round pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Karl Anthony Towns, and I am still freaking out about it right now. I haven't really calmed down about it, but I am actually going to let Devin talk about his first reactions to the trade first. I'm going to be patient and wait here.
I'll keep it semi-brief, honestly, because we've saved a lot of this discussion for right now, basically. So I do have a lot of questions for him as a Knicks fan. I am a massive Boston Celtics fan. I'm also a Clippers fan, but that's a little bit irrelevant given their situation. But as a Celtics fan, obviously I'm thinking about the top dogs in the East. I was already well aware of New York coming into this season just because they've clearly had the Celtics in mind as well. They've geared up with OG and McHale. If McHale gets anything close to what he was in Phoenix, you're looking at the best wing combo in the league. Obviously, that's good to throw at Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. So I was already a bit worried about them, just in the sense that I knew they were going to be a team we're going to have to compete with.
It feels nice to hear you say that. I just want to let you know. I was kind of hoping that you would say that you're a little worried. You guys like to act like you're not, so.
No, think about it. Aren't the Warriors the last repeat champions? I mean, we're in an era where there's a lot of parity. I, as a Celtics fan, I mean, not to go too much into the Celtics, but there's a little bit of a prevailing feeling, if you're chronically online like we are, that you just saw some naysayers. You saw some people saying things about it, and I want to let a naysayer know. The Celtics are going to be the first team to repeat champions since the Golden State Warriors. But with that being said, the Knicks are probably the number one team I'm worried about, East or West. I think maybe outside of me thinking Denver is going to figure themselves out, I think now with the wing combo, it's going to be the Knicks. Karl Anthony Towns, they're going to lose some offensive rebounding with losing Hartenstein, with Mitchell Robinson and his health. I mean, they were first last year. They were second 2 years ago. So it's going to be a little bit different on that front. Mitchell Robinson being shopped right now. He might be traded an hour after we press stop recording on this.
It's been close. I've been hearing a lot of stuff about deals. I don't know. It might happen this week. It might happen by the trade deadline. It's so up in the air right
now. So I'll kind of wrap my bit up here just because I want to hear more of what Ryan had to say. But I mean, the Knicks are going to have one of the best starting fives in the league. I think they're going to be competing with us for that top 1-2 seed. You know, Philly's got their own health thing, but I really think the Knicks are set up to have the best season I've ever seen them have in my lifetime. And I'm just curious kind of your thoughts on that, your thoughts on being legitimate champion contenders, and then also just your initial reactions, feelings-wise, about losing Randle and, Divincenzo and what he brings to your spacing.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think this is easily our best chance to be. But it's kind of weird. Like, going into the season, I already, kind of thought this was our best chance to be contenders. Just without a doubt. I was excited for this roster before we made the trade. And I thought we were going to compete with you guys regardless, just solely based off of the wing tandem of McHale and OG. When you have two guys like that locking up, I mean, obviously Randle had his issues, but I mean, he was still a good fit for this team, and he was kind of finally starting to figure out, let me chill on all these jump shots and just put my head down and get to the basket. Oh my God. Mets up 5-4 now? 6-4. Sorry, we got the wild card game going on too, so we might be interrupting ourselves a little bit every once in a while. I don't want either of these teams to win, by the way. Not actually, I'm joking here, but I hope a natural disaster hits the field and they have to cancel the games for the rest of the wild card, and neither of them advance. That's just me being a hater. Anyways, I mean, Julius, like I said, he was finally just getting his head down and like he was being really effective in the pick and roll, like when he was actually just getting to the basket and attacking. Because he's 6'9", 250. He's a freaking bowling ball going downhill. He's really good when he actually stops shooting so many step back jumpers and jab stepping. And I'll set the scene here. So I'm at Oktoberfest. I'm on the dance floor. I'm drinking my beers. I am definitely a little bit more than tipsy. I'm having a good time. I'm not really paying attention to my phone. I like check it for 2 seconds to check the time, and I put it back in my pocket, and I immediately pull it back out. So I'm like, does that just say that Julius Randle got traded? And I open it up, and it's for Cat. My immediate reaction is, Julius, no! Like I almost hit my knees in the middle of that dance floor. I was more upset about losing Julius than anything, because in my head, as a Knicks fan, I mean, Julius is the main reason that we are like in this position again, like actually back to like relevance and not being the laughing stock of not just the Eastern Conference but of the whole league. I mean, I was there for that time period between like the end of the Melo years and the start of this like frame, and I just he is like if we didn't make that signing back in the 2019 offseason, Jalen Brunson isn't here. Karl Anthony Towns isn't here. None of the guys on this team are probably here, and the Knicks are. And who knows what kind of position, because in that offseason, that was the KD Kyrie offseason that we missed out on both of them. We had to scramble to sign somebody. You're like, well, guess Julius Randle is our backup option here. And obviously, Knicks fans hated it at the time, and his first season was one of the worst seasons from an NBA player I've ever seen in my life. That he immediately turns it around next year, wins most improved, and leads us to the playoffs. So he's always going to have a really, really special place in my heart as a Knicks fan. And it's going to be really sad to see him go. Because in my head, we were going to win the championship, and he was going to be one of the ones to be here for it because he built this. He literally built this. So just as on like a human level, I am distraught that Julius is not going to be here anymore. Donte, too. I mean, even in his one season, he immediately became a fan favorite. We were talking yesterday. I made the claim that he's probably the second best shooter in the league right now. He gave me pause to that, but I still think, I mean, just off of volume and because he shot 708 threes last year and made 280 something of them. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's 282. And he shot 40.1% on them. So, I mean, he's right behind Steph. It's him, Steph, and probably Dame are the best three. So when you lose a guy like that, especially when he was going to be coming off the bench, that's a big hit, and it's going to be hard to replace that. So I am a little nervous there. I think that's like my biggest like negative from the trade is honestly less losing Julius from a basketball standpoint and more losing Donte, just because our benches went from one of the best in the league to now we don't even really know who's going to be the 8th and 9th man for real. And we'll get a little bit more into that once we start talking about lineups and stuff. But on the Cat side, I mean, it's a very clear upgrade, like without a doubt. I mean, he's one of the greatest shooting bigs of all time, if not the greatest shooting big of all time. It's him and Dirk. It's whoever you want to choose there. He is an instant improvement, whether it's off catch and shoot, off the dribble, from right behind the arc, or from the logo. He can shoot from any spot on the court. And I think what kind of gets undershadowed with that is he is really, really effective in his post-up games. He was the 9th most effective guy in post-ups in the playoffs last year. Jalen Brunson was first, by the way. I just want to make you guys aware, which is freaking insane. I'm trying really hard not to cuss right now. There's no reason for us not to. We're already a minute in, and this video isn't for children anyways. So we don't have to keep a filter. I'm trying to remind myself of that. Anyways, I probably shouldn't say the F word regardless, no matter what. Anyways, I'm sidetracking myself. It's just, he is so good on all spots of the court offensively. And when you have a guy like that, and Julius, you could kind of not leave him open, but it was easier for teams to focus their double teams on Jalen and not have to worry about Julius as much because his jump shot isn't as effective. But, I mean, now you have a guy like Cap who can literally get any shot he wants. He will dunk on your head, whether it's under the basket or driving to it. He is just so effective, and it's going to be really, really good for our offense. Obviously, like Devin mentioned, you lose a decent chunk of rebounding because Julius is a great rebounder, and iHeart being gone now is a massive blow too. But hopefully Mitch, if he's not traded, can come back by December and fill that gap again. And I'd be excited to see that lineup because I don't know. The whole question right now is whether or not they're going to play Mitch and Cat together if he does come back healthy and if he does actually come back to the team and isn't traded. So that's going to be really interesting to see. But I think it's going to be really effective in a completely different way from Rudy, because I do think Mitch is slightly better than Rudy offensively, it really take your pick, honestly. Neither of them have an offensive bag in any type of way. They're both standing dunk merchants, and I mean that with love, truly. But neither of them really have like an actual post up game. But I would say Mitch is probably more effective in the pick and roll. So that's my one thing that I think would be better than the Timberwolves offense. So those are my like initial thoughts right now. Again, I was just so distraught for Julius, and I still am. Like I said, he built this. He was talking about. I mean, he raised his son here. It's clearly literally like a week before the trade, not even a week, like 3 days before the trade, he posted this thing where his charity was helping out a school in New York raise money, and it's just cool to see things like that and how involved he was with the community. And just on that aspect, it's sad to see him go. So
Yeah, I've got several jumping off points from that. One, I just laughed in my head a second ago about the irony of if our eyes wandering, like we mentioned, we're watching the Mets now start to pull away from the Brewers here. A little ironic to me how you're a Knicks fan, we're sitting in front of a Knicks flag, and you hate the Mets with such a passion, but I am on the same page with you there. I mean, I'm a Celtics fan who hates the Patriots. So
right, yeah. I mean,
totally
generally it's just like
understand.
a Cardinals thing. Like they've just always been not like a major rival, but literally ever since that '06 series, I've just always
Yeah,
just
and
always hated them.
the photo of Wainwright running to Yachty, jumping in the air, Trump's behind him frowning.
Oh my god, yeah.
No politics, just a funny photo. That he's
Absolutely.
literally
I
right
kind
in
of forget
frame.
about that.
Yeah, that Beltran strikeout and him being such an awesome player for the team later. But yeah, that aside, several things. I mean, Brunson was 32-8 last year in the playoffs with not great spacing, especially at times when they decided to do some of those things like sag off Randle or maybe Hart wasn't. It actually improved in the playoffs, so maybe he's 3-point shooting wise, which is why, at least in terms of taking a couple more, which is why I don't want to necessarily harp on that. But you know what I'm saying. Some of the lanes he was driving through were, I mean, he was weaving through them. It was ridiculous.
Oh yeah, no.
And he was able to do that with that spacing. You add in Cat, the two-man game is going to be something. It's going to be very, very relevant offensively. Teams are going to have to worry about that. Teams are going to have to, I mean, that's going to be the main thing you game plan for is that pick and roll. And then obviously they're going to get creative. They're going to do a lot of other stuff off of that. Some of the questions I have for you is, we obviously know the four that are going to start, and I think we also think Hart is going to start. It's very, very likely. Do you think Deuce has a chance to play himself into that not just into the rotation more, but into a starting role because of his shooting? Do you think Tibbs even entertains the idea of? We know he likes to push it to the limit sometimes, but is he really going to play Cat at the 5 for that much of the season? I mean, I definitely think Mitch getting back and being healthy is going to be important. I think even for some just moments of defensive versatility or getting Cat some rest so he can continue to produce on the offensive end, I think that's going to be really important. So yeah, what are your thoughts more specifically on Cat at the 4, Cat at the 5? Do you get creative and play OG on bigs so Cat can play off people? I know he's not like a notorious roaming defender or something, but even just to try that. And then yeah, what do you think Deuce can do with his shooting? How much do you think he can really carve himself out a bigger role?
Yeah, so I'm kind of on. There's like a small, I don't say a small sub like sect of Knicks fans. It's a pretty decent size who like really want to see Deuce start because his offense is just progressively been getting better year after year after year. And no one like going into the season last season, Knicks fans wanted to find like a true backup point guard because we didn't expect like Deuce to really be able to like. We knew he was a lockdown defender and could shoot the three. But his development just as a playmaker overall has been incredible to see too. And not only that, like he can really get there, not at all three levels yet, but he is slowly developing that game. And when you have a guy like that, you can just tell works hard. I believe in the jump for sure. And I just think he works a lot better off ball next to Jalen. Even though he is 6'1", I don't really necessarily think that matters because when you have a team like the Cavs who have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, Donovan claims to be 6'3", but I'm pretty sure he's actually listed at like 6'1.5". So I mean, I think it will work regardless, especially when you have a guy like Deuce who is a miles better defender than either of the two guys I just mentioned. I just think it makes more sense, especially like I mentioned from our bench depth standpoint. I think Hart is a perfect six man and would be a really, really good way to fill that void. But like I said, if Deuce does take another offensive jump, then I guess it doesn't necessarily matter. But I do think it just makes more sense in terms of his like off ball ability on offensively next to Brunson, where he's not exactly going to be a main distributor, but he can still make an extra pass here and there, and he's slowly developing that game, and he can get to the basket a little bit more than he has been in recent years. And his 3-point shot is just miles better than Josh's. I love Josh, and he had a great shooting like playoffs, but a lot of that was because he just wasn't getting a lot of like looks. Like people were kind of looking him off, and
Yeah.
it did kind of start to crater back down like 29%, I think, in the Pacers series. And I don't think it's fake. He's like a career 32% shooter, I'm pretty sure. So it's not like he's terrible or anything, but Deuce is definitely a better shooter, and I just think that would open up the floor a lot more because our Knicks were, I want to say, second to last in spacing last year, and they have been in the last 2 years. So I think when you have a guy like Cat who's already like max spacing around Jalen Brunson, I think is absolutely perfect because he's just a guy, he can shoot the ball, absolutely, and he can get to his mid-range spots, but he loves getting to the basket, playing in the post, posting guys up. And when you can really utilize that game, it's going to be super effective. When you've got four guys that he can kick out to effectively and trust to knock down a shot, I just don't know how you stop that. Then, because then you have to choose, all right, who are we doubling here? Are we doubling Cat? Are we doubling Jalen? Who are we coming off of? Are we coming off of McHale? Probably not. Are we coming off of OG? Probably not. Your choice is probably Deuce because he has shown the least amount of games just because he's so young. But even then, he can light you up like he did Steph Curry last year for 36 points. So, I mean, when you got a guy like that and a guy who can shoot the lights out of the gym, I really do think it's the best option. And Hart's just such a perfect, like, glue guy six man. In my head, it makes a lot more sense. And he is, I think there is a valid reason for him to start just because of his rebounding alone. And he's obviously a good defender as well in his own right. But just being a 6'4" guy out there, because I feel like Thibs would probably play him at power forward, and we were talking about this yesterday. I just don't trust OG playing the four for an entire season, just with his durability issues. There's a lot of big fours that I just don't want him guarding full time, and I think that effectively that would have Josh playing the four most of the time, and I think he's better served not doing that. And even if he is a fire hydrant, it just still makes me nervous with his 6'4" frame. And I would rather sacrifice that for a little bit less size in the backcourt than the front court. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm at. And with Mitch, if he does, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I just have one last little thought. If Mitch does come back and is not traded, I almost think it kind of serves him better to start off on the bench because originally when he got hurt and came back like halfway through the season last year, Ihart was already in the middle of his breakout and he was playing amazing, and he said he was coming off the bench and he was perfectly fine with that. And he was really effective, just being a guy who can come in off the bench and get you 3 to 4 offensive rebounds and a couple of blocks and lock down whatever bigs out there. So I honestly think he's more effectively served like at the center position, like off the bench, instead of next to Cat. And I saw a tweet from a big Knicks beat writer yesterday talking about how when you trade for a guy like Cat and the money he's making on this specific team, with OG getting essentially a max contract, even though Jalen took a pay cut, still getting a big contract. McHale is getting a decent chunk of the salary too. When you're investing all that money into a guy like Cat who's going to be making $60 million by the end of it, I think you have to invest in him playing the full-time five rather than experimenting more with him at the four. Even if he looked good last year next to Rudy, his more natural position is the five. And he's shown that when he's locked in, he's not a great defender, but he can defend, and he's not going to like truly lock anybody down, but he can hold his own. He's a big enough dude to where he can go up against most NBA centers and be a relatively effective defender when he's locked in. And I think the main thing is what's going to need to happen is him and Thibs are going to have a nice little sit down before the season start and just really talk about, because it didn't really end too well in Minnesota when Thibs was there. And there was definitely some feelings of animosity with him and Cat. So I think them having just a mature conversation, and they've obviously both matured since that situation. And just kind of figuring that stuff out, and him being like, "Hey, man, if you want to be here, you're gonna have to defend your ass off." So I truly do think that Mitch will probably end up starting on the bench when he comes back, if he comes back. So
Yeah, I think the best version of McBride, or a version where he accelerates, is it gets you the closest to doing the thing I think that separated the Celtics from the field last year, which is being able to play that true 5-out. Like, there's not a lot of teams, and obviously there's a huge X factor involving Kristaps' health. You know, that's always going to be a thing that kind of lingers. I don't know if you're going to be able to. I kind of facetiously said it earlier about the Celtics repeating, but I don't know that you do that again with him playing 4 games. I don't know if that happens again. The East is going to be better. The Knicks are going to be really, really good. The Sixers have question marks of their own, but I mean, if they can put it together and be healthy, they're going to be a real threat as well. Even teams like, the Pacers, we want to see how much they progress. They already showed, obviously, a lot of things last year, making it all the way to the Eastern Conference Final, but there was a clear gap. As close as those games were, a sweep is a sweep, you know what I mean? Those teams are going to be better. So that version where McBride continues to get better, I think that gets the Knicks the closest to being the other team who could do that. In a hypothetical world where you did this and somehow kept Divencenzo, that would be, that would be heaven for Jalen Brunson to be navigating the offense, and you have Karl Anthony Towns, Bridges, OG. Anyways, you got to trade good players to get good players. You did the deal. I think it's going to work. I would say one thing I'm curious about is we've covered a lot of the offense and talked about it because it's really interesting. Everybody likes to watch points being scored, especially when it comes to those playoffs, those deeper playoff series where they're really trying to become that elite team, a champion. What do you think their response is to teams hunting Brunson? Do you think they're going to be able to hunt him effectively? They're obviously going to stick him on the worst defender. And I know he's not a bad defender. Like, he's not a horrible defender, but he is smaller. He is going to probably be a little more gassed from carrying the load offensively. A lot of people make fun of Dallas for letting him go. I do think it's silly, but there's also no way he's the player he is right now, trying to play second fiddle somewhere. Like, he's going to run your offense. It's obviously tiring. What do you think the effectiveness is going to be? Do you think teams are going to be able to do that effectively? And what do you think your response is, if not something specific, even if it's just we'll run a really good offense and have the 2 best wing defenders in basketball? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so in the playoffs last year, he definitely got hunted a little bit, but not as much as I expected, just because he is like a better defender than you would think. And we were, like you said, sticking him on the worst offensive guy, whether it was a guy who's out there to be a 3-and-D shooter. He can do that, not effectively, but he can do that. He can be a guy who stands in the corner with him and follows him around the court, make sure he's not getting off wide open looks. But still, I think that's going to be a point of emphasis this year with this team, is they're going to try to hunt him more often. And that's why I want Deuce starting, because when you have 3 guys, because I really do think Deuce has like all defensive team potential and a full-time starting role. He's one of the better defenders I'm not gonna say ever seen, but on this Knicks team, on this Knicks team specifically, he's one of the best defenders I've ever seen. He's just, because he was out there effectively guarding Steph and any other team's best guard on most nights when he was getting that. I can't remember. There was like 2 weeks where he was starting when we were like really down bad with injuries last year, and he looked incredible on the defense. He always has. He has such a good feel for like the passing lanes. Not just that, he will rip you if you try to go around them. So that's why I want Deuce out there, because when you have 3 guys who are potentially all NBA defenders, and OG, Mikhail, and Deuce, it's a lot harder to find that like hunting, and it's a lot harder to get those switches where Jalen's the one in the action. So I think that's why I want Deuce starting the most, because of the defensive side. I know I mentioned it'll help the offensive side a lot more, but it just makes a lot more sense when you have 3 guys who are just absolute clamps on the perimeter, because that really, And that also kind of not answers the Cat problem, but like I mentioned, Cat isn't always the best defender. He's not known for his defense by any means, but that doesn't necessarily matter that you don't have a true rim protector on the floor when you have the perimeter locked down like that. If people are getting past you, then there's no need to worry about rim protection. So I think that's where Deuce comes in and is his most effective. And yeah, so that's what I would probably hope for, is that those three kind of negate that issue. And also, hopefully with Cat being here, he won't have to worry as much about running the offense entirely. It'll take a little bit more weight off of his shoulders, so he won't be as gassed on the other side of the ball. So I think that'll help too.
Yeah, my only cause for pause there is on the path that the Knicks are going to be on, that you want them to be on, you're going to run into the Celtics. More than likely, they will have to play the Celtics to win the championship. The only thing, yes, 3 of those defenders are really, really, really good. There's still somebody left for Drew Holiday or Derek White. You know what I mean? And if you do have that X factor of Kristaps out there, we've seen he can get a guy and just shoot from the elbow, and there's no real defense for it. It's kind of just too high up. You can't really do anything. I do think I think what you said, it applies and it works for like probably 29 teams. It's just that will worry me come playoff time, and I do think that is why, obviously, different series, you play different players, you play the matchup. I think a guy like Mitchell Robinson would be really, really important in a series against the Celtics. OG and Mikal are incredible. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are still going to find some drives.
Right. Yeah.
So I think if he doesn't become a trade piece, I think he's going to be really important. You just got to rely on that health. And I think if you do trade him, I don't know. I think I'm almost talking myself through. I really don't think they should get rid of him. I think they should keep that extra defense, keep that, get him healthy. I just think he could be a really effective piece off the bench. And I was going to say, if you trade him away, get some sort of rim protection back. But man, when he's healthy, how many guys are even better than him?
Not a lot. I mean, he really is, I think, one of the more underrated centers in the NBA, if not like the most underrated. He's up there for sure. Just off his rebounding alone, I was going to mention it, but he is also an incredible rim protector. He was in all defensive talks whenever the season started. Through the first 30 games, people were saying he might make a defensive team this year just because his rim protection. I think he was at 1.2 steals and 1.7 blocks, which isn't anything out of this world, but he had almost that Wemby vibe of people were making sure not to get to the basket, literally driving away from the basket when Mitch was under there, because he's just so effective at it. And he's had seasons where he's averaged 2 blocks a game, so I mean,
that's how you know if a guy is elite, if guys have to think about it.
Absolutely.
If you're not worried about going to the basket, even if you still have decent rim protection, they're going to draw fouls, they're going to drive with confidence. If you make them think about it for even a half second, that's huge, because even that half second of a player, an elite basketball player, not knowing exactly what they want to do, that's going to lead to turnovers. That's going to lead to things like that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's almost, I'm not going to say more, it's almost more valuable than actually getting blocks, because you can create chaos off of that, get turnovers, Even if it's lower in the shot clock and you have a guy driving to the basket with 3, 4, 5 seconds left, no, I got to kick it out to this guy who's completely double covered or whatever, you know what I mean? So I think it's really effective in that way, and I don't want to see him traded. It's really just the injuries of it all, because outside of that, there's no reason that he shouldn't be on this team. I just worry about his health so much, and he hasn't played a full season in his entire career. He's always missed at least a handful of games or close to entire seasons. So that's really just where it comes from. I think the main rim protector we've been kind of targeting has been Rob Williams, who I would like a lot on this team. He does a lot of the same stuff that Mitch does. He's a little bit worse rebounder, but about the same rim protector. The only issue is he's 6'9", which isn't the end of the world, but I mean, Mitch
might be a slightly better offensive player too.
He is definitely a better offensive player. I'm just strictly referring to defensively.
No, yeah.
But no, offensively, Rob Will is definitely a better lob threat. No, they're about equivalent lob threat wise, but Rob's got way more of a post game than Mitch does, and he's really, really good on the pick and roll. So, and he's got a little bit of a mid-range too. It's not anything crazy, but he can break it out.
It's really that pick and roll and the lob threat thing. I've obviously watched him a lot, being that he was on the Celtics for that long, and I mean I've just seen it so many times. He's really really effective at. He's obviously uber athletic when healthy as well. And then he's just really good at reading that defender, reading the center, and knowing, is he really going to commit hard if I jump here, or can I just get a step on him and go? He's really good at that.
Yeah, so that's like my main guy I would really want if we're going to replace Mitch at all. I've heard the talks right now are kind of centered around the Pelicans and Trey Murphy. I've also heard that those talks kind of stalled out because the Pelicans don't want to give up Trey Murphy. I like that idea, especially as like a Donte replacement. I don't love it for the fact that you're relying on Precious Achiuwa to basically be your backup big at that point. And I'm sure they wouldn't let it stand like that. They would find someone. I can't even really think. I didn't look the checks. I wasn't even really thinking about this. But if we were to even like sign a center out of free agency, I don't even think there's really any guys outside of like Nerlens Noel, who I love Nerlens with all my heart for that 2020-2021 season, but no thank you.
I mean, I can think of like a couple guys that in theory might be available if they were on different teams, but I don't think would be available. Like, I'm thinking of like Brook Lopez. I think he would be good, but there's no real chance that Milwaukee is looking to part ways with him.
No.
A lot of the guys
not good last year. He was all right, but he really fell off. Just offensively, he was not great. So
yeah, I still feel like his game relies on not as much like quickness, speed. I think a lot of it's strength and size.
Mm-hmm.
I still think we see one more, not vintage, but like solid Brook Lopez
like a real
season.
effective season.
At least a good shooting season. Maybe he does lag on the defensive end a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I just think
he's still an effective shot blocker regardless.
He strikes me as the kind of guy who he's a legend. I almost just said the F word. He's a legend. Like he's one of the most underrated players of my lifetime, in my opinion. And I just think he's going to give us one more, just like Brook Lopez.
I know, I can see it for sure. Again, I'm not trying to hate at all or trying to say that he's like completely lost or anything, but he definitely had a down year. It was mainly, he turned it around post All-Star break a little bit, and it wasn't like anything terrible. It's not like, oh my God, get Brook Lopez off this team, but it was definitely a little bit of a vibe of, damn, Brook is old, and his knees definitely do not work the way they used to. Again, all love to Brook.
Emergency Brook Lopez pod.
No, seriously. Shout out to Brook Lopez, Brooklyn Nets all-time leading scorer.
That's hilarious. I didn't even actually know that.
You didn't? No, yeah, he was averaging 20 points per game consistently.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I just didn't.
I mean, no one stays in Brooklyn long enough to be their all-time leading scorer anyways. I'm going to say it. Fuck the Brooklyn Nets.
Dodged a bullet.
First F word.
I didn't want to cut you off earlier and interrupt your point, but when you were talking about that was the KD Kyrie summer, dodged a bullet.
Honestly, yeah. I don't want to say I'm thankful we didn't do it, but
I would be.
I mean, in hindsight, it's like, wow, that worked out better than I expected. And God, it just feels so good to be able to hang that over Nets fans' head and just be like, hey, remember when you had the best super team I've ever seen formed in my life and you did nothing? And now I'm kind of sidetracking us a little bit, which is fine. I feel like I've said a lot about the trade so far. We can veer off a little bit here. I got not like an argument on Twitter, but I was talking to this guy about how people were doing this whole what if stuff about that playoff series and how the Nets, or about how the Bucks played no one who was healthy, and if the Nets were healthy, they would have won it all. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if they would have. My whole point was that I don't think that they beat the Suns. I think the Suns end up winning that series if they play the Nets. That team was just so hot. Chris Paul was playing some of his best basketball. Obviously, Devin Booker is Devin Booker. And my main point was that they didn't have anybody on that team who was going to slow down DeAndre Ayton, who was literally the second best player on the team that year. He averaged, I can't remember now, but it was like 18 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists on near 2 blocks and like a steal. And we were talking about, he was like a legit second option next to D-Book, like for the future. And then obviously his career has panned out a little bit worse than that, but during that time, he was playing his best basketball. easily, hands down. And I don't think anybody on that Nets team was going to be able to stop him. I think when you have the most important aspect of basketball, in my opinion, not as just defense, but as rebounding. Because if you're not getting extra possessions on the offensive end with offensive rebounding, and if you're not being able to close out possessions on the defensive end, getting those defensive rebounds and all that stuff, you're not going to win games. So when there's not anyone on the Nets team, it was DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan was their starting center that year, I'm pretty sure. Right, but at that point, he might have been backup and they're going small ball. I can't remember for sure, but DeAndre Jordan was like
Claxton already, or what?
I don't think so. He might have been there, but I don't know if he was starting it. He might have starting for the playoffs.
I honestly can't. I just can't even remember the big.
I know. I trailed off. If I wasn't recording with my phone, I would look it up right now. I wasn't expecting to bring this up, or else I would have actually had a little bit more research for this. But again, I just don't. If Claxton was there, he was still young and not fully developed yet. Neither one of those dudes was stopping DeAndre Ayton. So I really do think the Nets end up winning that series. Or not the Suns end up winning that series.
I also just want to say, if we want to talk about health for that season as excuses or anything, I know I'm a fan. I really believe the Clippers win that year if Kawhi stays healthy.
Oh my God!
Yeah. I really think they do. They were playing some of the best basketball I had seen that team play.
100%, and we all know, like, when Kawhi is healthy, he is one of the top 3 players in the world. Like, at least during that time. Obviously, now it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, he went down seemingly every year, but I mean, we saw it for when he was healthy, even still as recently as a year or 2 years ago, and we saw obviously with the Raptors and then into that early stint with the Clippers. He is one of the most dominating playoff performers I've ever seen, period. On both ends of the ball, especially offensively, he just reaches a different level where I literally watch him shoot and I just look down to the scoreboard before it even goes in because I know it's going in. I'm just like, all right, how close are we now, or how much are we winning by? The run, and I think everybody who loves basketball loves his Raptors run. I mean, it's just absolutely so iconic. It's so the shot, everything about it. If he wins, if the Clippers stay healthy, and I'm not saying it's a given if they did. I'm not trying to make excuses, but in a parallel timeline where Kawhi won one, God forbid, 2 championships with the Clippers, the conversation we're having around his career is entirely different.
It makes me kind of sad. I think he's one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history because he genuinely could have led you guys to a championship that year, and he would have had three championships and 3 Finals MVPs. That easily vaunts him. Yes, absolutely. Easily vaunts him in the top 15, if not top 10 conversations. Like so, because we're in this hypothetical, he's healthy for at least like 2 more seasons after that, and so if he's doing that and actually being an effective basketball player, not sitting out half the games, I mean, I can't even imagine how we'd be talking about his career. Because I'm not even a Raptors fan. I remember, like, when that boom, 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 swish and Joel
never forget.
I was hooting and hollering. I was jumping around my room. I was going crazy for that shot. And I'm not even a Raptors fan. I'm a Raptors hater as a Knicks fan. Like, oh my God, I just loved Kawhi that much. And I thought that run was awesome. And man, it's just one of the biggest what ifs. Okay.
I mean, that's also so I'll end the Kawhi point with this. Is there anything more fitting to his personality than showing up for a year, winning the championship, and then just going home?
Joe, no, that's literally, yeah, that is the essence of Kawhi Leonard, 100%. And I love the guy, but that's it. That is him. Okay, so let's get to the Minnesota side of things, because there is a second team in this trade, and we got a little sidetracked talking about...
Does anybody care? No, just kidding.
Oh my God. So, I like this more for the Timberwolves than a lot of people are letting on. I'm really mad about how many people on Twitter are being like, you have no idea how much Julius Randle sucks. And it's like, he really doesn't. He's had some unfortunate playoff series for sure. That 21 series against the Hawks, he was literally the only player on that team. It was second year RJ Barrett, who was good, but he's not a self-creator, so they weren't really worried about him. And he was getting clamped up by DeAndre Hunter. And Derrick Rose, who was 33 years old by that point, And he was great for us that season, but he wasn't a true second or third option. He was a six man who we had brought into the lineup to bring some juice because Elfrid Payton was so effing bad that year that he had to be on the bench. There was no other choice. They just had to stop playing him.
Great hair though.
Fantastic hair. Thank God he cut it off as a Knick. Or yeah, it was before that, but by the time he got to the Knicks, thank God it was gone. Literally playing with those shooting hands in your face. I know everyone's made that joke, but I just have to remind everybody how silly that looked. Anyways, and then the Cavs series was this other really bad one. That first series that we won with Jalen Brunson, where he just did not look good. But he was also playing through an injury. So I really do think that when he's not being asked to be the lead option, and he's also not playing through a debilitating knee injury, he's going to be a lot more effective for them. Obviously, their spacing is going to be questionable at best, especially him and Rudy frontcourt. The whole idea of them being successful last year was that Rudy was your guy down low who could roam and be that rim protector and not have to worry about stretching the floor or really being anything on offense because that was Cat's job, and Cat could do everything on offense. And now you lose a lot of that. And you can tell right away because of this, like because of how ineffective that shooting is going to be. This is definitely, not gonna say mainly a salary dump trade, but they were gonna get really expensive. You had to decide to not pay someone. And in my head originally, because I have a friend who's a T-Wolves fan and a Rudy Gobert hater, he's obviously warmed up to him since, but still he's not a big fan of Rudy. So in his head he was like, trade Rudy, trade the guy who I feel like has a little bit, not more value, but...
It's just, even if that is the right basketball move,
you just can't.
You just can't with the trade you did.
Yes, exactly, and that's what I was going to say. Like, when you give up that much capital for him, not even 2 years ago, you just can't do that because it's almost admitting defeat in a way, and a front office just isn't going to do that. And you're obviously not trading Ant. Like, there was never even a thought. And then at that point, it's between the guy that we just gave the extension and Jaden McDaniels, who is an all-defensive level defender, and
Ant might choke someone in the front office if they traded his boy McDaniels away.
I know.
I see those guys seem like they're tight.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he's just such a perfect wing defender next to Ant. It really is, because
it makes perfect sense, and you just don't want to piss off your star player.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And his offense is also iffy is the thing, but I think he's 25 right now. Obviously, he doesn't have like a ton of growing left in this game, but when it comes to shooting, that's something that you can still develop over time and work on. And really, if you get in the lab enough, and it's not like he's never had a three-point shot before. It's not like he's an ineffective three-point shooter. He's just not a consistent one. And the rest of his offense has never been predicated around creating for himself at all. I like that a little hezzy there as I said that.
It really should just be getting better at the three-point shot, though, because you don't really need him to do much more than that. You want him to space the floor and guard the other team's best player.
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm saying is you just would rather make sure that his shot is still there and is consistent. So I hate that they had to trade Cat because that's the other thing. I'd say Julius built this shit. Cat was there for everything in Minnesota, through all of it, through that terrible, terrible, terrible team they had as rookie through third year to I think it was his third year that Jimmy ended up being there.
Trade me. You need me. Trade me.
I can't even imagine what that's like going through as a...
Has Jeff Teague told the story yet? He was there, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's talked about it at some point.
I think he was there when they put together Stonehenge. He's been there for literally everything in history that's happened.
Oh my God! Shout out Jeff Teague, man. Best storyteller I've ever seen in my life.
Incredible podcast. I need to learn their names. No disrespect, but the other guys he has on there with him are also very funny.
Yeah, no, they are. It's a great show. I love watching it. He's so funny. But, he was there too. I can't remember. He's definitely told a story about it at this point. I just can't remember what his perspective was.
Now I remember it. I just remember the main. I knew it already, but the funniest thing to hear him talk about was when Jimmy was like, he was like, "No, I want the scrubs."
Yes, yes.
And then he was funny.
He said, "I want you and you and you and him. Let's go."
He wasn't even dropping all the buckets or anything either. Like he was facilitating. He was setting people up. He was just playing good basketball and kicking the crap out of them.
Oh my god!
I would have paid my life savings to be a fly on the wall.
No,
in
seriously.
That facility.
I will pay $1 billion to see have the TMZ release the videos of that shit, man. Oh my god.
Oh, somebody would get fired.
Oh, 100% they would. Oh, that would be so funny though. But no, like he's been there through all of that, and it's just a hard thing to do as a franchise to let go of your. And it's your franchise player, obviously, now, but Cat was the guy for the longest time. And it's just a hard thing to do, but it really had to be done. They were going to, like I said, he was making $61 million by the end of his contract. That's just not feasible to keep all that money on the books, especially with the feared second apron, which a lot of teams are really, really, really going to get screwed over by. It's going to happen to you guys here soon.
That's why they say we're selling the team.
Right.
Who wants it?
No, seriously, wants to deal with this mess.
It makes me think with do you think that this is ownership, and I'm asking the question, I'm 99% sure this first part is the case. Do you think it's ownership going to the GMs, telling them that they have to offload that salary, and then in response, how much is it the GM selling back to the owner? Are they lying? Do you think they're lying to themselves even a little bit? Do you think they're lying to the owner on some level, saying like, no, we really do. We like what we got back. This is even. This isn't just something where New York knows on some level they have a bit of leverage. How do you think it played out in that way?
I think just off of the Devo aspect, I kind of think, obviously, I think they're lying to themselves. I'm biased here, but I do think the Knicks won the trade solely off of just how much better it makes them offensively as compared to Julius's offense. But because originally, from what I heard, the original trade was gonna be Julius and Mitch, and Devo was gonna stay because they wanted to try to keep the Nova boys together.
Would have been perfect.
Would have been perfect, but it just made no logical sense for the Timberwolves because at that point you have Rudy and Mitch, who are essentially the same player.
You need that shoot.
And then you have Naz Reid, who's also your backup big. You obviously can play the 4, but it's just, it gets a little fuzzy there. So it just made no sense for them. So that's where Devo comes in. And I think just off of that, that's going to help so much. And now this is where I kind of want to figure out what their starting lineup is going to look like. Because it feels obvious that it's going to be Mike Conley, Ant, Jaden McDaniels, Julius, and then Rudy. But then when I think of it, I was like, oh yeah, and then Devo will be 6-man. But then I forgot, Naz Reid. You have Naz Reid, who is your all-time 6-man, like without a doubt.
Keep talking. I got the cat allergies. I just got to splash some water. But keep talking. I'm listening.
Yeah, Ellie is slowly killing both of us, by the way. We both have cat allergies. I found out 3 weeks ago. I'm distraught about it. Mine aren't as debilitating as him. I just have to get some cluster shots. Just a little look into the life of Ryan and Devin for you guys. My cat is slowly killing us. Anyways.
Oh, we're good now.
Yeah, so my thought was, so Devo will be 6-man, and the reason he wanted to leave was because he hated the idea of going from 35 minutes a game to 22 being the 6th or 7th man. He probably would have been, in my head, he was going to end up being the 7th man because Josh Hart probably would have ended up being, he just makes more sense as the 6th man than me being that first high energy guy off the bench. So when you have your minutes, even if he was going to be the 6th man, his minutes were still getting slashed big time and his role significantly decreases. However, I think in like just how the modern NBA works, like it's not like your starting lineup is always your closing lineup. And I think we're gonna see more point Ant and more point Devo, just not starting. I think they're gonna start out with Mike Conley regardless, because that lineup's gonna need Mike Conley for some facilitating. But Ant's playmaking shots have definitely grown over the last 2 years. I think he was at 5.3 last year, if I'm not mistaken. It may be a little lower. But he was right around 5 assists last year, which is great for a shooting guard. You won't complain about that. obviously he's not like a distributor, but he can pass it around. He's unselfish. He obviously is going to get his shot, but Ant's just like a true superstar. He's going to look for his shot and shots for his guys. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And Donte was playing some. He was more of a combo guard than he was an actual like wing whenever he was in Golden State playing with Steph and that offense. You kind of have to be. It was made more sense for him to be a combo guard, and so he has that ability, and he is a pretty darn good passer in his own right. It's just not his game, but I think he's capable of doing it for short bursts, and especially in end of game situations where you need a little bit more shooting out there. And even then, I think we'll also maybe see some lineups of like Conley, Devo, Ant, McDaniels, Rudy, and even maybe a little bit more Julius at the 5, because Thibs was talking about doing it before we actually made this trade because we had no backup big depth, so we're going to see more Julius at the 5 in general this season no matter what. I think it can still happen because they have a lot of lineups they can play around with.
That just feels a little small to me.
Oh,
if you're
definitely.
already kind of going small with the first 4 with playing multiple guards. I think Rudy at the 5 there, that could work really well because you could almost, this might sound so dumb, but almost like 5 out defense, like just have Rudy as that roamer, have him be the guy who goes around to the screen setters and all that stuff while you're playing against a team that's trying to play 5 out. If you're doing that, I do think, Ant obviously incredible defender. What's it called? McDaniels, incredible defender. Even Alexander Walker is really solid if you want to like switch anybody out. Like you said, they have a legitimate like borderline problem, good problem to have.
Mm-hmm.
I think the starting lineup will be important. It'll be very interesting to keep tabs on, but it's really going to become more about like what are their, because I think me and you both expect this team to, even with making this trade, try to be competing again. What are your rotations looking like? Who do you really cut down to in the playoffs? Who's getting 35 minutes instead of, 18, 22, whatever? That's going to be what's going to be really interesting for me to watch the Timberwolves early in the year, working out the chemistry. And, at the end of the day, yes, they're all basketball players with skill sets, and you can put it on like it's 2K and think about how they're going to fit together. But also, guys will just develop chemistry, know how to find each other better. Health might be a thing that just makes decisions for them on some of those lineup things, and that's really what I'm going to want to be looking at is how does that shake out. And then I just had one more point as it relates to this trade. I do think there was an element of the apron being the reason. Not an element, I think that's probably the main thing. I don't think they got robbed or anything, but I do think they did it to avoid that, and I just think that's kind of weak. I think it's kind of weak when this is the best. Can you imagine being a fan of that franchise and, you're a local, you're a diehard. You have the best season likely of your life if you're a younger fan. Maybe not if you saw a couple of those KG years, but even then it felt like they were closer to really doing it this year. It felt like there could have been a couple bad bounces or a few bad quarters away from at least being in the finals.
Oh, absolutely.
And I said several times during the run, I think the Timberwolves were the team I wanted to play the least as a Celtics fan. I didn't like the size. I think they could have caused a lot more problems for us not having Kristaps be 100% than the Mavs were able to. Gafford, non-shooter, lively, great, high energy, but a rookie. I think they would have been able to exploit that more than the Mavericks ended up being able to. And I just think, as if you're a fan and you're so hyped, that's got to be a little bit deflating to just be like, we finally get some momentum, we get the ball rolling, and you're telling me it's money and it's business BS. That's what's getting in the way right now. I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to be really, really good. I also think the Knicks won the trade, and I think in a perfect world where we're just playing 2K, I would like to have seen Carl and Ant have one more try at it together.
Absolutely, and I think that's where I'm at too. Just because, obviously, from a basketball and money perspective, you're like, okay, yeah, whatever. But just from like a vibes thing, like you said, like it's literally their first conference finals appearance since those KG teams. I can't remember. I want to say 04. I might be wrong there, but it was around that time. That was so. My buddy, shout out Jack Barnes. That's who I'm referring to here. That was literally the first thing he said was you put out the best team that we've had in years, and you immediately go and blow it all up because of contract situations. Like obviously by the end of Cat's contract, it just wasn't going to be viable. But I think they had one more year of at least figuring it out and putting it all together because I like that Mavs team and they're really good, but they were just really hot last year in the playoffs. So they just kind of ran into a buzzsaw eventually. And I think if you give that team, because that was only their second, like barely full year of actually, because Cat got hurt last year. So it wasn't even really a full year of them putting it all together. And that first year didn't look great, obviously, with the Rudy thing. But if you go into year 3 and you finally find some momentum with that squad, I think they easily could have been not just a Western Conference finals contender, but an actual finals contender and make some real noise. And it's just sad to see that. Again, it makes sense from like a basketball and business standpoint. But again, it's just weak. It really is. I hate the concept of like, well, we're hitting on the second apron here soon. We don't want to get penalized. We might as well just ship them out now. I don't know. I definitely agree that they could have waited one more year.
There's a lot of fans that are probably just in their mind blaming Rudy. Like, it's not his fault, but he is the face of the problem that now exists.
Right.
There's probably, I'd imagine, some fans that feel like we're losing Cat, the guy who grew up here, probably a lot of people's favorite player for years now, because we made this trade for this guy that there's still sometimes question marks and matchup concerns with certain teams and things like that. So, yeah, that's got to be hard. I feel sorry, Jack Barnes. I feel sorry, man. I hope it goes well, and I think it will. These words and yeah, I think it'll still go well. I just now am slightly less confident than I would have been saying it's going to go great.
Yeah, me too. I will say, the more I think about it, the more I like the idea of the Ant and Julius pairing. I like Ant playing with like a true bully ball guy. I know it's not going to be perfect by any means, especially like I've been mentioning, Julius is not nearly as good of a shooter as Cat is. He's just, like I mentioned, he's a guy who puts his head down and gets to the basket and will dunk on you. And they're a good team in transition. They are a fun team in transition. So when you have a guy like Julius running behind you on the break who can put you in the rim at a moment's notice, I think it's just going to be a really fun duo to watch this year, even if it's not perfect, and I'm slightly more worried about them than I was going into the year before the trade.
I think one thing he can bring that I think Minnesota needed and needs more of is this is obviously not what you want. You don't want this result in an offensive possession, but it happens if you find yourself with 3 seconds left on the shot clock and no time to really run a pick and roll or do something or even make a pass to somebody. Julius, at least, and maybe the numbers would just prove me wrong. Maybe I'm just going off vibes here, but he feels like a guy who's good at that kind of shot, that off kilter, off schedule. So if my vibes are correct, I think they are. From my watching him, I think that's going to be really good.
Absolutely. He's without a doubt a tough shot maker and a tough shot taker. And
Harrison Bader. Sorry, keep going.
Harrison Bader. No, like I think the issue is just his volume of them got too high and he wasn't taking tough shots like end of the shot clock stuff. Yes. And if he was, it was because he was pound for 10 seconds and then doing it, rather than like catching, shooting, firing tough shots. When he's doing that, he's super effective. Or like taking like 1-2 dribbles and then doing it. But when he's isoing, doing his little thing and then getting into it, it's a lot worse. And when he's doing it at such a high volume, obviously unless you're Kevin Durant, like if you're taking those types of shot at a high volume, it's not going to look pretty. It's going to end up being bad percentage-wise. But I watched him do it for years. When he actually is not taking them at a crazy rate and defense isn't expecting it, he can make those shots. That's how we won the game against Miami 2 years ago, where he literally just took the ball off the inbound with like 2 seconds left in the game. Just one dribble, boom, bank three. So when he does stuff like that, he is effective as long as it's not super high volume. So they need another tough shot maker like Ant. And I love Cat. It's not really his game, because he's just so effective as a shooter. It's not really, you know what I mean? So that's definitely something that Julius can add to that offense and give them at a moment's notice if they need to chuck up a grenade. So
for sure. Yeah, I was just gonna like at quip in, but it didn't really fit. Even Kevin Durant, it's like you don't even see him take that many of those shots because he's so good and he knows not to. He's just too good. He's gonna get to his spots. He's gonna figure that out. But yeah, that tough shot making is definitely going to be nice to have. I think we should kind of start wrapping it up.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say we can like wrap up with like grades and stuff here in a second because we've been rambling for like 40 minutes almost, I think.
Yeah, I did have one more. Actually, I'll save some of that for we'll just talk about it.
Okay.
Stuff with just how the different teams are going to try to defend the Knicks on offense. But if we go into that point, we're going to nerd out for 35 more minutes.
Definitely. Because we'll have more to say on Monday, so we can kind of go into that.
Yeah. I feel like we're at a pretty good spot if we do some grades and start wrapping it up around here.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with the Knicks. I'm going to go with an A- for right now. Obviously, I've mentioned it makes us so much better offensively, and there's so many different looks that we can play with on just type of actions that we can run. I'm really excited to see the pick and pop game. I think in my head, it's like the same as the Ravens with Derrick Henry and Lamar. Like, who do you choose to defend? Because eventually, at some point, you defend the pick and pop so much it starts turning into a pick and roll, and then boom, Cat's going for the basket, and you're screwed. So just that aspect, I think, is going to be so good. My only reason for not being like an A or an A+ is just defensively. I think you don't lose a lot because they're essentially equivalent on defense. They're both solid defenders when they try. It's just you got to get them to try. And they're not going to be like absolute lockdown even then. Like they're still going to be good. They're going to be solid. They're going to be serviceable. They're just not truly like clamping anyone up for 4 quarters, and that's okay. Tom is a good enough coach to figure out how to scheme around that. I think that's just the one aspect where I'm a little nervous. And not only that, but the bench depth as well. We got to figure out how to work that out. I've been seeing that it'll probably be Tyler Kolek and Landry Shamet, which makes me a little nervous. I like Kolek. I think he's going to be good, and I think he's going to be a lot better than they're expecting for this rookie point guard. I just don't like the idea of Landry Shamet in big 2024. That makes me very nervous. So, I don't think the Knicks are done by any means. I think Leon Rose has a couple more moves up his sleeve. I'm not even necessarily saying trades, but I'm sure there's a free agent or someone out there that we're not expecting to be signed that ends up coming in. We'll see, but I'm going to go with an A- for the Knicks. And then for the Timberwolves, originally my first thought was like a B-. I think I'm going to go with a B for now. The vibes thing is what really throws me off, and Julius's offensive game varies a lot from Cat's. But I think they are still going to be a contender in the Western Conference. I think with Ant leading the way, they're still going to be very, very good and very, very hard to beat. And Chris Finch is a really good coach, and they have a ton of depth now. They're going to find a way to play with a lot of these different lineups, and I think it's going to take a little bit of time for them to find the true closing lineup that they want to stick with and like roll with. But when they do, I think it's going to be a really effective one. So I'm going to go with a B for the Timberwolves.
What is that Detroit pick protected, and what's the year again?
It's protected top 13, top 10, top 8 for the next 3 years. So basically, it's worth nothing.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's not going to come.
Yeah,
it's not happening.
Even if it does, like I'm sure by 2027, like Detroit's not going to be a top 8 worst team in basketball. Even then, they're probably going to be like mid-teens to early 20s. Hopefully, you hope. But that team is no, exactly. You never know. It's not going to convey this year, that's for sure. And even then, the Knicks aren't really in the business of drafting and developing rookies at the moment, especially when we have a guy like Kolek who can come in and be instant offense. Bacone Dedit is 18 years old, I think, or not. Like he just turned 19. So we're going to develop him for a couple years, and he'll be our not starting forward, but he's going to be a good forward piece off the bench pretty years. By the time that pick conveys, he'll probably be playing. And you got Kevin McCullough from Kansas too, who I like, who is already 22, I think. Yeah, he's 22. Who can be effective, maybe not right away, but within the next year. So when you have guys like that, I'm not really concerned about getting new rookies in the building anyways. It's not really where our timeline's at. So it's really not a pick that I'm worried about whatsoever.
For sure. For the Knicks, I think I would have to go. I'm hesitant because there's still one big prevailing question in my mind, and that is Karl Anthony Towns good enough to be the number 2 on a championship team? I think we saw a lot of good evidence for it last year. We also saw some moments where it was a little bit more up in the air. We saw some shooting slumps at times. I honestly don't know if I even feel confident not that I have an answer. I don't know if I have an answer for that question. I don't really know. I think that's kind of why I'm hesitating to grade, because on paper, I think I'd give it like an A. I'd give it a flat A. I almost dropped it one like half letter grade or almost a full letter grade for giving up Divencenzo. I wish there was a world where you could have gave them more picks, but like we've talked about, this is an interesting trade because it's 2 teams that are contending. So you have to give up talent in those trades. You can't just, Minnesota might not care about your first round pick when you're really good 3 years down the road or whatever it is. So I think I'd give it a flat A for the Knicks. I'm really excited to see it. I do still believe the Celtics are going to be the best team next year, but I really think they're going to be the second best. I think they have a definite chance to have the best record. I think they could win the East for sure. And then once you get in the playoffs, you're a bad shooting game, quarter, turned ankle, or anything away from anything happening. And I'm not saying it would take an injury or anything like that for the Knicks to beat the Celtics. They could absolutely do that in a 7-game series. It's anybody's series. So I think I would give it an A. I'd feel comfortable giving the Knicks an A. For the Timberwolves, I'm gonna go with a C. I'm worried about losing that shooting big. We've talked before about how valuable those guys are. And Cat is not a rim protector. I know that there's that class of shooting and rim protection that's just like a whole different thing. If you got one of those guys, get him on contract. Don't let him go. But Cat is probably the best shooting big man in the league. I think if he's not one, he's 2.
It's what him, Jokic, and Embiid are probably the top 3 right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'm probably putting him over all of those guys at this current moment.
I think I want to go C-. I think it's fair off vibes. I think it's fair off me not liking the ownership's decision to not run it back one more time.
Yeah.
But I also still think from the basketball perspective, I don't know if it's going to be C- bad. It might be C bad. It might be A good. Like, there's still, I could see both of these trades working out or not. Either one. I don't really know, I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think it's fun to grade, but, man, if I'm being honest, I have no idea for either.
It's gonna be interesting. This was so out of left field. I feel bad for Cat that he just didn't get any warning whatsoever. I heard that Glenn Taylor and all them went over to his house and told him in person, but still, that's just, I can't imagine how blindsided.
That's the least you can do.
Seriously, could you imagine him getting a phone call from his agent or something?
Email.
I can't even imagine. But yeah. Or being one of those guys that sees it from the sham suite. That would be.
He sees a sham wow, and that's how you find out.
Right. I couldn't even imagine. No. But yeah, just off of vibes thing, it's gonna be very interesting. And who knows? Maybe Jalen, Mikhail, and Josh are pissed that Donte's gone, and the vibes are rancid this season. I sure hope not, but it could happen. It's a really, really interesting trade because, we've kind of been talking about, for the show, you don't see trades like this, talent for talent trades from contenders. I truly can't think of the last one off the top of my head right now.
I need to research.
No, seriously, I genuinely
couldn't
can't
just
think of
pull
the last
that.
one off the top of my head, and it's not anything recent. So when you have something like that, it really is. It's a volatile trade. It can really go either way. I would like to think it works out favorably for both teams in my head, just off a pure basketball standpoint. I don't think either team really lost the trade. I like I mean the Timberwolves a little bit, but I just off of like I said, getting all that depth back with not only Julius but also Divincenzo, I was gonna help him a lot, and I think it'll save it from being an absolute disaster if it does end up not working out on the Julius side. Um, but yeah, obviously it's a little too early to tell exactly how everything's gonna work out. I'm gonna get into training camp and all that stuff, but I'm just excited. This is a huge shakeup for the league. And yeah, I think that was a good little first edition to a little preview of what the whole show is going to look like on Monday. Yeah, I don't really have like an actual like outro yet for this. I don't think we've really kind of gotten that far to think of this, but thanks for tuning in, y'all. I'm Ryan. This is Devin. This is Loose Balls. Make sure to like and subscribe. Send us a comment. Let us know how you feel about the trade. This is your grade. And we will see you on Monday with a full episode, the first full episode of Loose Balls. All right, we're out.